They used to fly with the plane and just launch you out of the plane. One of the best city tours I've ever been on, and it's free to go on. Welcome to another Gaz Right video, and welcome to Asuncion, Paraguay. We're going to be covering everything about the history, the colonialisation, the liberation, the dictatorships, the animosity in between, sprinkled with a little bit of G-dubs magic, but it's nice to get a bit of history, a little bit of culture in the old bones. It is a free trip, but it's advised that you pay $10 at the end. If you do want to go on the trip, I'll put you directly in contact with a guy, because he ends up saving $2 because he still has to pay the booking company to make the bookings. But if you enjoy what you see, if you have any questions, bang it in the old comments whilst you're down there. Hit that subscribe button, still en route to 3K subs, and we'll get straight into it. Coming up in number one is the Pantheon. So a lot of the buildings, or some of the main museums and buildings that we went to were actually shut today. We're here on the 3rd of January. So between the 1st and the 7th, a lot of things are shut. So if you do avoid 1 week of the year, it would be that place. Would be that month, but it is one of the best months to come here because it is 35 degrees today, pure sun, and it's the coldest day of the entire time we're spending here. So the weather's insane, it's absolutely boiling. Ultimately, the writing on there on the Pantheon means fate and patronism. Ultimately, the Virgin Mary is like the protector of the city, and inside there, and the city was actually named Asuncion after her, or not, well, I guess the name of the saint on there. Ultimately, I'm not too clued up on my old biblical facts and biblical saints, but apparently she's the person that takes the body to heaven. The 15th of August is her saint day, and the same year of the old liberation, 1537. Asuncion was actually founded by a Catalyan family, and at one point in the Paraguayan history, they actually voted a Spanish guy as the leader of their country, Domingo Irala. And apparently, the guy was telling us today, apparently it's because when he came over here, and you saw like what he looked like then, he had like a beard and stuff, and the Paraguayans, one of their gods used to have a beard, so they put 2 and 2 together and thought, get this guy ahead of the old country. I guess on that, like I say, we've just been on a walking tour today. I'm going to try and walk you through it as well, with some notes, with some knowledge, with a little bit of history. There's going to be a few things that are probably absolutely nailed on, and there's going to be a few things that slightly hit the mark. In the last video I did, the one on Brazil, I was like in the Spanish colonial period. Obviously it was Portuguese, so you know what I mean, we're going to get 99% of them right, but if you do want to correct me on anything, do bang it in the old comments down below. Next up on the list, we went over to like the military school, which is like the new Congress building. So this is like 300 years old, where like their Congress is now. And then there's a building directly across, which is like the old Congress, and they kind of obviously neighbor each other. There is a neighborhood nearby, which he was like, this is like the Favela in Paraguay or Asuncion. So if you did want to go near that, this would be the place to go, where Congress is. It's like anything in life. There are good things about cities, bad things. There are negative experiences and good experiences. He was like 99.9% of tourists that go through there would be fine. If there is a time to avoid it, it would be at night. Goes without saying, if you're in the UK, if you're in somewhere in Europe, when's it most dangerous? In the evenings. But yeah, if you did want to avoid an area which would probably be considered a little bit more loose, that would be the area to do so. There were loads of armed police, batons, guns and stuff, and I've said this in a few videos now. When you're from the UK, when you're from Europe, I guess mainly from the UK, like we don't have any police with guns. So when you see people with like rifles, it's a bit like, oh, it's a bit tasty at the minute. Is it kicking off? And the guy's like, no, this is just a Friday in Paraguay in Asuncion. It is pretty chilled. One of probably the coolest buildings that we heard about is Palacio Legislativo, something along those lines. I'll overlay all the names so you can search yourselves. But again, the building's not that impressive, but it's super random that he was like, guess who built this building, or guess who paid for it? And he's like, oh, it's a country. So we're like, right, okay, so we're getting closer and closer, and somebody says China. He's like, oh, it's near China. Anyway, going through and through. I'm like thinking of all the countries around China. We're absolutely not hitting the mark, and I'm like, my geography's pretty bloody good, so I can't wait to find out the answer. And he was like, it's Taiwan. So Paraguay, basically one of the only countries, obviously globally and in South America, that still support or recognised them as a country, and they were friends since 1958. Obviously, the time then they last had a dictator, which was he was a huge hater of communism, so obviously supported Taiwan, and obviously didn't like the Chinese. Yeah, which is obviously pretty mad behaviour. We then went over to what I would probably consider like the most aesthetic, the most flair-looking building. There is so many security around the outside. Like, you can walk up and halfway through the gardens, but you can't like go in, and like you can't even like walk on the grass. I guess you can't really walk on the grass at Buckingham Palace. That's probably actually fair enough. But yeah, that was like the most, I guess, flair building. And then he was like, oh, because we were saying how hot it was, and I was trying to stand behind a tree because I was boiling. It's like 35, feeling like 41 degrees. And he was like, oh, where are you guys from? We're like, oh, like the UK. And then depending on how well people know, like Manchester or London. And he's like, oh, the last time I had somebody from the UK, we had to call an ambulance because they passed out. So probably looking at me and them, the ginger and the northern, I think you two are next on the list. Directly across from that are a series of like colonial buildings. Some of them are now bars, some are other offices, but this is the oldest. This is the oldest building in the entire country. Again, this is probably another plug for doing a walking tour and speaking with a local. Me and them tend to not do these, but every time we do them, we're like, they're so good. They bring everything to life, take it to the next level. If we were thinking, oh, we'll just walk around all these buildings ourselves, you would get zero pieces of information from doing so, because either you don't know what it is or all the information is in Spanish. Unless you speak Spanish, you're going to be in a world of trouble. So definitely do that, and also find out the M kept being like, oh God, there's a Guinness sign. Oh, there's a Guinness sign. Why is there a Guinness sign on the wall all the time? And I'm like, where is the Guinness? Get it in the old bones. It is because the harp is the national instrument of Paraguay. So again, they love a Guinness, we love a Guinness. If you're watching this, probably high chance you also are partial to a little Guinness. Best drink in the entire world. Next up was Palacio los Desperados. Again, not how you pronounce it, but the longest dictatorship in the whole of South America was 35 years. And basically this is a statue of, obviously, this dictator in Paraguay underneath a rock. So it used to be a statue in the center of town. They destroyed and demolished the statue and then made it into like a, I want to say like a memorial type bit in the middle of a park, showing that obviously he held, I guess, the country down. He was meant to be like an anti-communist. Again, do you know what I mean? My history, my political knowledge, it's not the best, but this is my insight based on kind of what we were taught today. He was meant to be like anti-communist, but turned it obviously part dictatorship, part, do you know what I mean, communist reign, and obviously for 35 years. And he showed us a picture of this red Chevrolet, and he was like, oh, it's a police car. And basically this was like the death squad. Basically, this picked you up, you'd never be seen again. So it was like a red Chevrolet, flew about, they kidnapped 400 people, never to be found again, and possibly one of the loosest, most moving, weird, crazy stats. The whole thing is how they killed them. So if you got taken by that, it wasn't like firing squad or lethal injection, anything like that. They used to fly with the plane and just launch you out of the plane. The loosest thing I've heard in an absolute long time. And again, he was like, how do you think that they got away with this? And obviously we've been traveling around South America, so obviously we've learned a little bit about like Reagan's influence, and obviously the influence of the US on like Colombia and so-called states. So same here, that when they passed like the torture laws and they were made legal, then different countries used it for like police interrogation, but actually they were just killing and torturing people. So yeah, pretty yeah, mad stuff. The city centre, like the old time where the colonial buildings are, where we were today, is, he showed us a picture from like 50 years ago, and it was buzzing, it was vibrant. They had trams, they had like all sorts of really nice buildings. That's where all the nice bars are. That is the history and the, I guess the history of Paraguay and Asuncion. If you want to stay in like the more new, the more gentrified, the flash area where me and Emma stay in, which is considered like a little bit of a nicer area, it's only 15 minutes away, like nice hotels, nicer bars, nice restaurants, rooftops. You want to stay around like San Blas. And again, we're just going to go between the two, get a little bit of history, get a bit of knowledge, get a little bit of beer warriors in the system, and just float about the place. But yeah, he was saying that because there was just so much carnage that went on there, they just thought, right, let's just reinvest a little bit further away. So that bit is getting more and more run down, I guess, by the old day. We then moved over to the House of Independence. This was the core of like the colonialisation, the colonial buildings, and I think this is where, if you only go to one place, this is where the most history and knowledge can be bestowed upon you. When you walk through all the buildings, I mean, there's huge colonial influence, of course there is. I was like, oh, it's like literally being in like Buckingham Palace or somewhere in Europe, where how they stage and show things with like the different rooms, the armour, the different weaponry that was used. This was like the old Spanish like governance house, like bows and arrows, all like different like European paintings. And the other thing as well, this is something that I've said in a few countries now, like Uruguay especially, but everything's just open. There's no security, there's no staff like, don't touch this, don't do that. There's just so much respect for things and like lack of, I guess, theft there. Again, I'm only having a brief insight. I've only been here 24 hours, but all this stuff is open to the public. All these museums are free to go into. You can just wander in off the street. So yeah, just a little note on the safety side of things. What was quite jokes as well is the Spanish leader that came over was running the colonial building and obviously, yeah, trying to take over the whole of South America. He married a Paraguayan woman, and her daughter, the daughter's husband or boyfriend was one of the liberators of Paraguay. So yeah, I thought that was pretty mad. They had 3 years after the liberation where there were 5 liberators who ran the country, and then they had the first ever leader, Jose Francia, hopefully I pronounced that right, who actually ran a dictatorship for 26 years after this. And one of the underlying themes that our tour guide was talking about today is like, anything in life, there are pros and there's cons. He was like, dictatorship bad for obviously the kidnappings, the killings of this, but Asuncion as a city and a town, he was like how much it prospered and what it looked like in comparison to like the city centre today is very, very different. So it's kind of, I was getting mixed feelings from him of whether, I assumed overall he thought it was a bad thing, but there are a lot of positives underlying and running through it as well. They talked about mate, so if you're from Argentina and Uruguay, maybe you'll hate this, but he was like, Paraguay, this is where mate came from, we were the founders. Now he was saying that basically each country is always like, no, we started it, we founded it. So let me know in the comments, where do you think mate came from? Next up is a little museum. This is around like history, agriculture, a little bit on tax, which is actually really interesting in Paraguay. And then a little bit about the future. He didn't really touch too much on the future, which I think is a good thing on a tour, because you want to look at the past, the facts, the stats, the history, not too much of what may or may not happen in the old future. First ever president, 1844, who opened the borders to everyone. So obviously huge influx of trade, huge influx of goods that they could buy, they could sell. And the British, maybe we did one thing around the globe, bringing the old trains over to Paraguay. And then this is actually pretty, yeah, I don't know if the word is like disgusting, touching, heartfelt, outrageous, but again, I think it's good to know and learn about history because there's a lot of good things that happen. There's also a lot of bad things that can often get buried, forgotten about. On the 16th of August, they celebrate the Paraguayan Children's Day, and during like one of the big wars with Uruguay and Brazil, there's a big dispute of what happened. Basically, the Paraguayans ran out of soldiers, so they were sending children into fight, and the Brazilians killed them all. There's discrepancy, he said, between the Brazilians saying, oh, they had fake beards and fake mustaches. Whether that's true or not, it's still pretty horrid that you're sending kids into war. They actually lost, or have lost, half of their land during the time. So obviously it used to be a lot bigger. Paraguay lost it to Argentina, Brazil and Uruguay, and then Uruguay is the only one that actually gave the land back, I guess, in more recent times. But yeah, used to be double the old size. He was saying the only war they ended up winning, Paraguay, they've been in 2, they lost that one, and then they won the one against the old Bolivians. But yeah, I mean, the Bolivian people, I can't imagine they were, they were giving too many beans. They were just down the salt flats, taking in the ruthless scenery. That's probably a really bad misrepresentation of history, but nice people, great place. Definitely get Bolivia on the old list. If you're into a bit of agriculture, soy, beef, mace and mate are the main exports of the old country. And he was saying that the heat here, the humidity is actually so bloody hot, like 35 degrees. He said it gets up to like 40s every single day soon, and it got up to like 47, 48 degrees last year. And the humidity is absolutely crazy, rising year on year. And they think due to the mass deforestation, which is obviously impacting obviously all the crops and agriculture as well, which is like the main main negative that's impacting the country. They've not had too much inflation, he was saying, in comparison to other countries. But yeah, the natural disasters are less than ideal. Tax, which I think is pretty interesting. So I read online, I've seen a few videos, that there's 0% income tax on foreign earned goods, foreign earned money. So if you're a digital nomad, if you're coming working here, the internet is absolutely banging, by the way, so I'd highly recommend it on that front. But yeah, for any foreign earned income, it is 0%. Other than that, if you just work here, live here, it is a 10% flat, but there's loads of deductibles. So he was saying he usually pays about 5%. Is what he pays. I guess makes a little bit of the old cash on these tours. Don't know about him too much, not to the old tax man. But he was saying because of that, the public services, he said, are extremely poor. Again, can't comment too much on that because I've not had to use any of them yet, and hopefully it stays that way. But he was saying for like hospital things, people obviously try and go private, try and go to Argentina, and then anyone with money will try and send their kids to a private or comprehensive school to increase their chances of learning. Final bit of the old tour, we swung past the oldest pharmacy, which was built in 1905. Predominantly Italian medicine, and obviously a lot of all the old scripts they write out. It was like, I literally walked in, the first bit is obviously like a bit more like modernized now, and obviously is what they use, and then the back section is kind of like what it looked like. I literally felt as if I'd walked into like a Harry Potter set with like the Bunsen burners and the pipettes and all stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. Finished off at the old cathedral where a little mass was going down. But yeah, overall, would highly recommend. That is my whistle stop tour of all the information we got given this morning, trying to just digest, divulge, and then send it your way. Ultimately, basically, if you just watch this, you've got to the end, see the conclusion. It's go on a walking tour. The knowledge, the history, the insight that you get is 1,000,000% more than if you just went there on your own. All the museums we went to were free to go in, but all the information, like on little plaques and stuff, was in Spanish. So if you don't speak Spanish, you can't read Spanish, I would 100% go on a tour. And even if you can, you're going to get even more enriched knowledge from speaking to somebody. So I would highly recommend, if you do want to go on the tour that we went on, message me down in the comments and I'll work out how to get you the guy's number. You can book on direct, and ultimately it saves him like 20% of the fee that you will pay him. We paid him $10 each, which is pretty much what everyone else paid him. Well worth it. If you book one on TripAdvisor, on stuff like that, we were seeing them at like 30, 40 pounds per person. So one, I thought it was fantastic. Two, it's definitely worth the old money. If there are a few things I've got slightly wrong here, there, do not come for me in the comments. Actually, do come for me in the comments. Tell me what I got wrong, and then at least I can learn and try and take in more of that insight. So then next time I'm talking about it, people ask me about Paraguay, I'm giving them the right things, but 99% of the things there will be absolutely correct. Paraguay is looking like a little bit of a right so far. Super green, super vibrant, super buzzing. Tasted a little bit of the old local food, and we're going to get a few more beer warriors in the system. Question in the comments, or whilst you're down there, hit that subscribe button. Still en route to 3K subs. We're coming very, very close now. I'll see you tomorrow, babe. Remember the chef. He's always cooking. Let's get it.